So this is the Warhammer, Forge Warhammer, and I am back to talk about Reich positive Christianity. What in the world is positive Christianity? It kind of sounds like an evangelical term, but it's not. This has nothing at all to do with American evangelical or Pentecostalism, and everything to do with state-endorsed Christianity during the time of the Third Reich. So, within the Church of Germany between Protestants and Catholics, and this was settled in 1648. In 1871, well, actually, let me track back a bit. In 1804, there was the Mediation Acts in the German states, and the last of the ecclesiastical sees, or the last of the ecclesiastical sees and rights were abolished and overwhelmingly secularized and confiscated and added into other states, if not directly into the French Empire. So in 1871, Germany was united under Prussia. And Prussia already had a state Protestant church. There were Catholics in Prussia, of course, at least since the Silesian Wars in the 1740s. But overwhelmingly, Prussia was very Protestant. All of the Calvinist and Lutheran and different Calvinistic and Lutheran churches were united into the state Protestant church by the King of Prussia. And then Otto von Bismarck initiated his Kulturkampf. Bismarck's Kulturkampf repressed and gradually pretty much shut down most of the parish churches in Germany, to the point where almost the entire priesthood was expelled or could not even work in their order or in their parish, administered and ran the affairs of the state, as well as the relationship of the church and the state. So traditionally in Germany, as in the rest of Europe, in other Protestant European countries, Germany believed in unity of church and state. Even though the Weimar Constitution abolished it, under the Third Reich, the church again became an instrument of the state. And it became completely subjected and expunged to the workings of a totalitarian society. It was completely influenced by Nazi ideas. Now, all of the points and principles of the Old Testament were completely rejected in Nazi Germany. The Nazi Germans believed that the Jews designed and had written the Old Testament to try to seduce and to try to manipulate Christians, and the primary and the writings of the apostles. But most of the Old Testament was not taken literally anymore. It was not read or taken literal, as was the case with the New Testament in Nazi Germany. So with the Protestant churches, which made up the majority of German congregations, you had the Reich Church, which pushed for a mixture of Christian theological and National Socialist ideology. And it was basically a National Socialist version of churchianity. It did not have a free outlook, it did not have any kind of an evangelical setting, and it was much more closer to mainline Reformed Lutheranism or Reformed Lutheran Orthodoxy, Reformed Calvinist Orthodoxy. There is also the Free Lutheran Church that was organized under Bonhoeffer. But before you start to salute Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1960s and 50s cited a lot of quotes from Bonhoeffer. Martin Luther King Jr. was greatly influenced by the writings and the letters of Bonhoeffer, or the collected letters of Bonhoeffer, which were collected by an English Episcopal deacon after the war and translated into English from German and from Latin. So the Lutheran Catechism, the Lutheran Standard Writings, the Book of Common Prayer, and most of these other types of Lutheran Orthodox, Lutheran High Church, Lutheran stuff were retained. There were some differences, Force. They had already gone through and survived the worst of the Kulturkampf with Bismarck, and now they were going through the processes of the Third Reich, which were not necessarily as repressive as the Kulturkampf had been in the bishoprics, the dioceses, and the archdioceses were largely retained, as before in the Weimar period. A new concordat with the Vatican Holy See was organized with the Third Reich, and the priests were made to fall in line with the doctrines and submit to the laws of the state. And the church and the state were basically once again united into one order, and there was a lot of aspects of Germanizing the Catholic Church. Now, quite a lot of the parish bishops generally opposed this Germanification of Catholicism. This was not such an issue in Lutheranism, although Lutherans did resist this kind of National Socialist Germanification of Christianity and this kind of so-called Germanic Christianity that was supposed to be the law of the land. Most Catholics prefer to use the traditional Latin Mass. Catholics continue to use the traditional Mass. They continue to use the Morale or Mirel seasonal lines of prayers and stuff. The various holy orders in Germany continue to pace as they did, following very closely in line with the state and also with what was set out in the Catholic doctrines in Rome. So there is a lot of contention within the Catholic Church of Germany about the traditional church teachings and stuff of the popes and the bishops and the parish priests and the doctrines of the NSDAP. But there was also a bishop, a Catholic bishop in Germany, who tried to create a free Catholic church that was not subject to the Catholic Reich Church. Pope Pius XI, or Pope Pius XII, was the Pope over the church during most of the time that the Nazis were ruling in Germany. In 1929, Benito Mussolini and the Fascist National Party gave autonomy to the Holy See and allowed them to establish around the Lateran area of Rome an independent country known as the Vatican City. And so there had been all throughout the 18th and 19th century a very strong backlash to liberalism, to libertarianism, to modernity and stuff. Some popes embraced aspects of modernity and thought that it could be mixed in with Catholic doctrine. The Catholic doctrine could accommodate modernity. There were Catholics that wanted to strictly retain the traditional Mass, traditional rites, retain traditional sacraments. And there was a lot of trouble with this during both Bismarck's Kulturkampf and also the National Socialist period. But regardless, most of the priestly holy orders, most of the monkish orders were able to cooperate and largely serve the points of the National Socialist state. More or less, most of the Lutheran priests, the Lutheran bishops and preachers, were also more or less able to also cooperate. as well as the parish priests in the Catholic Church, with the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Anglicans, the Mormons or the Latter-day Saints and other stuff. And then you had these fringe groups like Jehovah's Witnesses, some Latter-day Saints, and various other very American, very small American-derived fringe sects that were very much repressed, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, who had all of their property confiscated and taken away from them, and they were put into concentration camps and were not supposed to openly preach or openly pray whatsoever. But aside from that, most of the various Christian sects and Christian things continued under this influence of positive Christianity. Most Germans at the end of the day, or most citizens of the Greater German Reich, really did not care in regard to what sort of worship that they did, so long as it was basically just mainline Christianity. So the Protestant churches, and especially the Lutheran churches, basically continued more into the holy orders that joined the priesthood orders, like the Cistercians, the Benedictines. They were taken out and put into concentration camps. The Gypsies and Czechs and Poles were also. The Catholic clergy in Poland was very much vehemently repressed, shot and killed by both communists and Nazis alike, and pretty much the entire Polish intelligentsia was wiped out during the war. And there was likewise a lot of repressions that occurred in France, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, Poland, and especially Russia, although Russia was already an atheistic state by this time. But there were Orthodox Christians that still lived in the Soviet Union, that even tried to cooperate with the German Wehrmacht. A bit of an Eastern Orthodox stuff in Germany. Probably about close to maybe 600 Jesuit priests were put into concentration camps during the time of the Third Reich. I'm not exactly for sure how much repression was done. Most of the Christian repressions in the Third Reich were done against Poles, against Czechs, Jewish converts to Catholicism or Protestantism, Russians, Belarusians, Ukrainians, and stuff of the like. But yeah, so anyways, what happened to positive Christianity? What ultimately became of it? Well, a lot of the Lutheran preachers, like of course Bonhoeffer, and a lot of the parish priests did not really cooperate or agree with the terms of this positive German Christianity, and they tended to be very strongly dissident towards it. Now, a lot of these people ended up in concentration camps. Some of them just went underground. Some of them even joined the rather small, moderate German resistance against the Nazis and against fascism. Some of them just cooperated and retained loyalty to the end or whatever, but the Third Reich basically was a secular-run state. The National Socialist Party endorsed freedom of religion, even though that wasn't really the case. That was the kind of the thoughts about it. Quite a lot of the Nazi Party tended to be rather agnostic and indifferent to religion. The Third Reich tended to be a secular state. After the Second World War and during the Allied occupation over Germany, the Allies destroyed and abolished all aspects of this Reich Church thing. And so the churches survived in Germany But the Allies destroyed and wiped out all National Socialist influences over them. And finally, for the first time in like forever, the church and state unity in Germany was over. In West Germany, the Constitution guaranteed the full separation of church and state. And from the 1960s and on, Germans began to lose their religion, to the point where now most Germans tend to be quite atheist and agnostic. In East Germany, an atheistic communist one-party, one-state regime was established, and all the churches were repressed, even harder than anything under the National Socialists. By the time of German reunification, former East Germany was the most atheistic place in the entire world. There is absolutely no churches really at all in former East Germany. Some of the aspects of the neo-pagan Volkisch movement and some aspects of National Socialist doctrine combined with communist atheism had a major impact on East Germany and why it is the most atheistic place in the world, but that is another story for another time. So yeah, also, Germany, modern Germany, like most European countries today, tend to be very highly non-Christian and non-sectarian. You're not going to find, you'll find a lot of old churches, but you're not going